Greetings, friends. This is episode 2 of Ghost Towns of Freeborn County. I'm Gary Schindler, a historian and board member for the Freeborn County Historical Museum and Village. And in this episode of our podcast, we're going to focus on the abundance found in Freeborn County. And that abundance includes an abundance of resources, diversity within the countries and states in which settlers came from, and also a great deal of diversity and abundance in the church congregations of principally the Protestant faith that made up the villages of Freeborn County. Just a reminder again, the Ghost Towns of Freeborn County podcast is a 6-part series. Our first episode was gave you a snapshot of the ghost towns of Freeborn County, again a county in south central Minnesota. And this episode will look at the abundance of Freeborn County. Future episodes will be the race and fight for the county seat. The Churches of Freeborn County is episode number 4. Episode 5 will profile some of the villages, ghost towns in Freeborn County, and our 6th episode will be some strange and unusual tales across Freeborn County. Again, a reminder too or give us some context of the history. Again, Wisconsin became a state in 1848 that triggered the establishment of the Minnesota Territory by the Stillwater Convention. That was approved by Congress. Minnesota Territory was approved by Congress in March of 1849, and then statehood was achieved 9 years later on May 11th, 1858. And the settlement of Freeborn County started in 1853. Just to give you a sense of that settlement, people were very entrepreneurial. The railroads owned land, and they were promoting Freeborn County along with the settlement of the Minnesota Territory, promising free land or very affordable land, but also promoting the abundance of the Minnesota Territory with its lakes and its rich soil. And so there were promotional efforts done in Europe, a lot of it in Germany and the Scandinavian countries and in England. And there was also promotion of Minnesota Territory on the East Coast. So New York, Pennsylvania, we'll see that some of the early settlers came from those areas because of the promotion being done. If we look at the abundance of Freeborn County, just to give you a sense of it, between 1855, when the first village was established in Bancroft along Albert Lee Lake, to 1900, there were nearly 40 communities established in Freeborn County. And today, there are 16. So you can see that that's a significant decline. So again, many of those 40 communities disappeared and became our ghost towns. But in the 1880 census, just to give you a sense of the significance of the size of some of these communities, here's just a list of our ghost towns and what their populations were, again, including residents within the village, but also the surrounding rural community. Bancroft, near the location of the current Good Samaritan Retirement Center, Bancroft was 950 people. Bath, in the very northern part of Freeborn County, north central Freeborn County, had a population of 919. Moscow, the eastern edge of the county, east central border of Freeborn County, Moscow had a population of 650 people. Newry in the northeast corner had 737 people, and Nunda had a population of 776 people. There was also an abundance of nationalities. The first place we usually look are to our Danish settlers, but there are also settlers from Germany, Norway, England, Wales, and Iceland. And also a variety of states from which new settlers to Freeborn County came, included folks from Wisconsin and Iowa, the state of New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Indiana. So again, beyond the resources, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but there was an abundance of diversity in my mind as far as the countries that people were from, the states in which they were from. Another aspect of the abundance of Freeborn County is the diversity of the faith community. And one of our episodes in the future will focus on the churches of the ghost towns of Freeborn County. But here's just an example. Now, this isn't a ghost town. This is Geneva. But in 1880, the population of Geneva, Minnesota, Freeborn County, was 454. But there were at least 7 different church denominations within that village of Geneva. And let me just give you a sense of what they were. There was a Methodist church. This was established in 1857. Now be mindful, the first preachers that came to Freeborn County were our itinerant Norwegian Lutheran ministers that traveled from village to village, staying at people's homes, but baptizing, marrying individuals. Perhaps a church service was held in someone's home. In this case, the Methodist Church was actually held services in a store in the village of Geneva. So we have the Methodist Church. We have a Roman Catholic Church established in 1859 in Geneva. We have a United Brethren congregation in the home of John Himes in 1858. United Brethren are a fairly liberal denomination, and there are a dozen or so members. So these are not large congregations, but they did exist. We have a Seventh-day Adventist church that was established in the schoolhouse in Geneva in 1876 that had 10 members, and that lasted until about 1882. We have a Universalist church. This is a Protestant denomination that essentially advocates for universal salvation and has a link to Unitarians. Another congregation in Geneva, just to give you a sense of the diversity of the faith community within these villages, was United Brethren. They're linked to what is considered the primitive Methodist Church, and practice the sacrament of baptism for the most part and marriage, and has a link somewhat, the United Brethren, to the Mennonites. So again, just to give you a sense, in this village of 450 folks, we have 5 or 6 church congregations that were established, again, meeting in people's homes, or perhaps in a schoolhouse, or in a general store in Geneva. So that faith community also is an indication of the abundance of Freeborn County. Let's also take a look at now really the principal topic for today, and that is the abundance of resources tied to Freeborn County. And some of these were rumored that they were a potential source to capitalize on that didn't quite pan out, and I'll explain those in a little bit. But if you want an example of what Freeborn County looked like in the 1850s, I would encourage you to take a drive to Fairfield, which again is northeast of Albert Lee, north of the Walmart on a county road. You'll hit Lurdahl, and you'll see the creamery there, which is quite prominent. Lurdahl is one of our ghost towns. But if you drive further east, you'll have to be on the watch for a monument erected to commemorate the location of Fairfield, Freeborn County. And along that county road, you will see some low rolling meadows and islands of oak trees. And that'll give you a sense of what our early settlers saw. Perhaps thicker groves of oak trees, but the geography of this area is what is called an oak moraine, which is, again, gently rolling hills and meadows with islands of oak trees. Is a oak moraine or oak glacial moraine. Fairfield will give you a sense of what it looked like in Freeborn County. I got goosebumps literally driving there and parking, and really had a sense of stepping back into the past of what our earlier settlers saw when they first came here. Again, some of the resources of Freeborn County tend to give you a sense of the diversity of the resources here. Again, Freeborn County is around 450 acres. There were a variety of streams, about 30 lakes, wells that were easily dug to get to groundwater, and the fall, or the current of the streams, was considered good enough for water power. Other things that people found, though, were quicksand near wells, and the water quality in Albert Lee, even though it's not a ghost town, was considered mucky and slushy, water full of leaves and branches. So those marshes of Albert Lee are pretty well known. The soil of Freeborn County by the early settlers was described as black loam, a rich black soil, partly that color because of charred remnants of prairie fires. You have a clayish type loam, a sandy loam soil, and the land was described as prairies, rolling, low rolling hills, and islands of oak trees. The folks that came to Freeborn County and then did some clearing to establish farms and communities. There are 42 varieties of trees found in Freeborn County, principally bur oak, red oak, elm trees, black walnut, ash, willow, cottonwood, and maple trees. But again, 42 variety of trees. Some other resources, there are rumors of copper near Blue Earth, and there was some talk that there was coal near Freeborn. And there was excavation work done, and it was deemed to be a poor quality coal. I'm assuming a lignite type coal with a lot of impurities, but they had to drill down or dig down 120 feet to get to the coal in Freeborn, and it was deemed to be too expensive of an enterprise to take advantage of that resource. So those efforts were abandoned, and they never did find copper near Blue Earth. Some other resources, lime, peat moss. Here's a description from some of the early settlers that the peat moss in Alden, even though it's not a ghost town, was 3 feet deep, and that the peat moss in Freeborn, the village of Freeborn, was 8 feet deep. Some other resources, limestone was also found near Freeborn, and something called quicklime, which was used in the processing of iron and steel. That was found in Freeborn County. But I would say the abundance of Freeborn County in the day, and still today, was of the fertile soil. So let me give you a sense of what these 1,800 farms. In 1880, there were about 1,800 farms in Freeborn County. This is an example of their production. Wheat, for example, 104,000 acres of wheat were tilled in 1880, producing over 1 million bushels of wheat. There were 20,000 acres of oats that were planted, producing 750,000 bushels of oats in 1880, and corn, nearly 15,000 acres of corn that were planted, producing over 600,000 bushels of corn. Be mindful, this is a little distinction about Freeborn County that I don't think is widely known, but in 1880, Freeborn County was the number 2 producer of wheat in the territory of Minnesota, or state of Minnesota. Some other crops that we might not think about that were part of Freeborn County that really aren't being done today, but there were 1,000 acres of potatoes that were planted, producing over 100,000 bushels of potatoes. There were 100 acres of sugarcane that were planted, producing 9,000 gallons of sugarcane syrup. We had apple trees, which is, again, in abundance to some degree today, 29,000 apple trees producing nearly 2,500 bushels of apples. A few hundred pounds of tobacco were planted. There was honey. 3,000 pounds of honey were coming out of Freeborn County in 1880. And there was livestock. We had what was called milch cows, MILCH, dairy cattle, 7,000 head in 1880, producing 500,000 pounds of butter and 16,000 pounds of cheese in that year. Horses numbered 7,600. There were 7,000 hogs in Freeborn County in 1880, and over 16,000 cows were being raised in Freeborn County in the 1880s. Let me just showcase for you, too, the ghost town of Bath, which again is north central Freeborn County, on the northern border of the county. And this is their 1880 farm production, a population of 919 people that lived in Bath. And just to give you an idea of what they were producing, there were 4,000 acres of wheat that were planted in 1880, producing about 70,000 bushels of wheat, 800 acres of oats, yielding nearly 26,000 bushels of oats. Close to 900 acres of corn were planted, producing about 20,000 bushels of corn. Barley, 46 acres of barley, yielding 2,500 bushels. Rye, 2 acres of rye, yielding 53 bushels. Potatoes, 55 acres, and over 4,000 bushels of potatoes. Again, the folks in Bath tried sugarcane. There were 10 acres of sugarcane planted that year, producing close to 250 gallons of a sugarcane or a sugary syrup. 17 acres of hay were harvested, about 30 tons. Other production that happened that might not be common, but wild hay, 25 acres, timothy seed, 2 bushels of timothy seed, clover seed, 32 bushels, apples. There were 1,100 apple trees near Bath, producing 65 bushels of apples. They did try grapes. There were, in 1880, 10 grapevines producing 100 pounds of grapes in Bath. Sheep were also raised there, 150 or so sheep were shorn that year, yielding about 550 pounds of wool. And on the dairy side of things, 375 cows yielding 32,000 pounds of butter and nearly 600 pounds of cheese. Kind of give you a context here, in 1857, a bushel of wheat was selling for 45 cents. Today, that price, at least on the day of this recording, was around $7.50. Most of the cattle that were raised here that weren't used for dairy were shipped to Chicago. Albert Lee, by contrast, produced out of their creameries 200,000 pounds of butter compared to the 32,000 pounds of butter by Bath. So it gives you a sense of the wealth and diversity of the economy and the faith community. But another thing that I think is part of the abundance and helped this county prosper is how people got here. There's a diversity of methods of how they got here, but also how they lived when areas were initially settled. So the means of transport to get to Freeborn County included ox carts and prairie schooners. The covered wagon would come to mind. Some folks came here by rail, and some walked. There were some Indian trails and some trade routes, some trails, and people could walk to Freeborn County and get things established. The Minnesota Historical Society made reference to an area becoming civilized, and this is in relation to the dwellings that existed in a place. To be mindful of that, some folks started off with pretty minimal dwellings. Many folks slept in their wagons. Some slept on the ground. Some even dug a hole and covered it with timbers and spent the winter in a hole in the ground with their families. Some of the initial dwellings were what were described as shanties, which is really a shack that you assemble what lumber you can and build a structure to at least get you through a temporary time until you could actually build a cabin or a home. The Minnesota Historical Society said once you had a home or a cabin, you were becoming civilized. So there are a variety of methods to get here and where you perhaps initially stayed. And then finally, for this episode, I want to mention that for a community to survive, I would say it was either to fight hard for it, and some of that was political, to become the county seat, or to make a deal to merge with another community. Its flexibility also comes to mind on the survival of our ghost towns. Was if things didn't quite go as you planned, if the railroad didn't come through, or if the county seat fight didn't quite work out, some folks literally packed it up and moved to another community, buildings and all. The survival of a village really relied on a railroad coming through, the hope of a railroad coming through, and some villages were started with that hope, but when it didn't come through, either through the sale of a railroad to another larger entity, that village never developed at all. Establishing dairy as a part of your economy, again, being part of the county seat, was critical, and we had 6-7 different villages and cities vying to become the county seat, because that was almost insurance to be a town that would prosper. There were some efforts to merge communities, and I'll tell you about that in our next episode in the fight for the county seat. Or, like I mentioned, it would be flight. It would be basically things didn't work out and people moved to another territory, another state, or another community within the territory of Minnesota. And then just a final little note, there was a progression or an evolution that a settlement might take. So first an area is settled. It might be established as a station, and that station might literally be a stagecoach station or perhaps a depot for a train. You might move from station to village and from village to city and perhaps be permanently established. I think we've seen signs that read unincorporated village. Those are usually outside of a established city that didn't quite evolve to the next level. But that is the conclusion of our second episode on the ghost towns of Freeborn County, taking a look at the abundance that existed here, not only in resources, but in people, the states they're from, the countries they're from, and their the diversity of the faith community. I want to thank you for listening. And our next episode in this 6-part series, The Ghost Towns of Freeborn County, will be the fight or race to become the county seat.
This collaboration is made possible by the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund through the vote of Minnesotans on November 4th, 2008, administered by the Minnesota Historical Society.